Hello, I'm Mike Ward. Welcome to the American Cannabis Summit, Countdown to Legalization. Today, we're going to make history. During this exclusive event, you will be taken deep inside our nation's most controversial, most misunderstood, and what's quickly becoming our most lucrative industry. We stand at the forefront of an unstoppable economic revolution. It's a new gold rush, a green gold rush, and it's just getting started. No longer is tobacco America's cash crop. With each day that passes, more farmers are becoming millionaires from growing cannabis. Bold entrepreneurs are opening dispensaries from coast to coast. The lines to get in are stretched around the corner, and most of their new customers are senior citizens. Cannabis tourism has become the latest craze in travel. People are now skipping Napa Valley wine tours, choosing instead to embark on weed tours in Colorado and Oregon. Doctors at leading institutes are harnessing the plant's medicinal power. They believe miraculous treatments for chronic pain, insomnia, depression, and countless other conditions are within our reach. And the most brilliant minds at universities like MIT and Stanford are developing cutting-edge technologies to bring cannabis to the masses. Imagine pushing a button on your cell phone and 6 cannabis plants begin to grow discreetly in a small corner of your home. This device automatically dispenses nutrients, optimizes the lighting, and even notifies you when it's time to harvest. Well, you don't have to imagine because that technology already exists. It seems everywhere you look, people are making a fortune from cannabis. Some invested in tiny marijuana stocks and watched as their holdings soared virtually overnight. Others backed little-known startups long before they IPO'd. Today in the United States, cannabis is a $10.8 billion industry. But what does the future hold? Could America's new cash crop become a $100 billion, maybe even a $1 trillion industry? Well, you're about to find out. If you want to learn more about the cannabis industry, if you're seeking a way to break into this lucrative market, or if you've been biding your time waiting for the right moment, then pay very close attention to everything you're about to hear, because America's green gold rush is just getting started. As we speak, big investment firms and members of the Fortune 500 are building enormous war chests. They're preparing to push billions upon billions of dollars into this market, and they could strike at any moment. So right here, right now, you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to beat them to the punch and stake your claim. Your reward could be the kind of wealth that lasts for generations. Now with me now are 2 leaders of America's cannabis revolution, former Speaker of the House John Boehner and Danny Brody, an executive behind 2 of the largest cannabis IPOs in history, including the largest. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be working with you, Mike.
I'm excited to be on the team.
We've got a lot of folks watching this now. This event is the first of its kind ever. It's garnered quite a bit of buzz in the media. We're still tallying the final numbers, but we're projecting that millions of people will be in attendance, watching from their homes and offices. Our inboxes have been flooded with questions. Everyone wants to understand this industry. John, we're a short walk from the Capitol building, your old office. You've been hearing from your friends that big changes are coming. And frankly, you're leading the charge, exerting your influence to push these changes through. Now, you've identified 3 events. They're approaching fast. Each will transform the cannabis industry forever. You're going to reveal them, and more importantly, you're going to make a major announcement. Now, outside this room, nobody has heard what you're about to say. But tomorrow, it could be on the front page of every newspaper from coast to coast.
And we may turn a few heads.
Danny, cannabis stocks have been popping up on exchanges for a few years now. And what a wild ride it's been. One day, some are trading for pennies or fractions of a penny a share. Then out of the blue, they shoot up thousands, even tens of thousands of %, only to come crashing down to earth just as fast. Now, all that volatility and risk has a lot of folks passing up these lucrative opportunities. On the other hand, the cannabis firms you've taken public are now worth over $1.6 billion. So we're going to talk about how to separate the winners from the wannabes. We've even identified 3 companies our viewers should consider targeting right now. Plus, we have an entirely different opportunity to discuss: how to become a successful angel investor in privately held cannabis startups. So let's jump right in. Now, John, most folks are familiar with your story. You were born in Cincinnati, Ohio. You grew up in a working-class family in a 2-bedroom house with 11 brothers and sisters.
And we all shared one bathroom.
You certainly didn't let your humble beginnings hold you back. In 1990, you were elected to Congress as a representative for Ohio's 8th District. You were a member of the Gang of Seven, which exposed the House banking scandal. And in 1994, you helped craft the Contract with America. In 2011, you became Speaker of the House. And while you were in office, you were one of the staunchest opponents of cannabis. You said you were unalterably opposed to legalization. But then, in the spring of 2018, you shocked a lot of people on Capitol Hill. You joined the board of Acreage Holdings, one of the largest cannabis firms in America. So let's address the elephant in the room. How the heck did you have such a dramatic change of heart?
Well, Mike, that soundbite about being unalterably opposed to cannabis is almost a decade old. Back then, like a lot of folks, I was getting faulty information. And one of the turning points for me was when I met this Navy SEAL. Honorably served our country for 20 years. He suffered horrible concussions, and more concussions. And after he got out, he kept getting serious migraines. He couldn't see straight, he couldn't think straight. The VA prescribed him all these hardcore drugs. And he tells me, I don't want all these drugs. I've got a wife and kids, and I want to be a father. So he refused to take his medication. He was just suffering. Then he tries cannabis, and the migraines vanished. I started hearing a lot of stories like this. Vets using cannabis to treat their PTSD, depression, chronic pain. It was helping them. So I started researching the industry. Do you know cannabis was a major part of early America? Our founding fathers, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, both grew it on their farms. Take a look at this, Mike. You get a kick out of it. This is a $10 bill from 1914. And if the cameras could zoom in on this, you have President Andrew Jackson on the front. Back then, he was on our $10 bills. But if you flip this over, what do you see? Those are American farmers harvesting cannabis. Cannabis was such an important cash crop, it made it onto our money. Then you start digging into the medical uses, and it's astounding. Back in 1909, a leading American medical journal recognized cannabis as a potential cure for asthma and tuberculosis. You can go back even further, 4,000 years ago, biblical times, that's when people started using cannabis as medicine. So I realized I was wrong. And let me tell you, I've been having more and more meetings with my friends and colleagues on the Hill about this. Some of the most conservative politicians around, and their views are evolving on cannabis too, just like the American people. This is a big phenomenon. Cannabis is here to stay, and this industry is only getting bigger. When I was presented with an opportunity to join Acreage Holdings, I jumped at it. We're a fully integrated cannabis firm with dispensaries, cultivation, and processing operations in 14 states, with 3 deals pending to take us to 17 states. We're a major player, and we're only getting bigger.
Now, you're all in on cannabis.
Yes, I'm all in. This is the time to go all in on cannabis.
And Danny, you are an architect behind 2 of the largest cannabis IPOs in history. The first, Emblem Corporation, you took public in December of 2016. They're a large producer of medical-grade cannabis. And then in May of 2018, you took the Green Organic Dutchman public. It was immediately hailed as the largest cannabis IPO ever. Now your team is using this capital to build cultivation facilities in Ontario, Quebec, and Jamaica. Today, these companies are worth about $1.6 billion. And it's worth mentioning, they are both Canadian firms. Canada just put an end to their prohibition. Like here in America, we've already seen a bunch of cannabis firms shoot up on their stock market.
Right, which is really incredible when you think about it. Canada, the entire country, has fewer people living in it than the entire state of California. And get this, the rosiest projections have the country's cannabis market hitting $9 billion by 2025. In the United States, this industry is already north of $10 billion annually. And we're still at the very earliest stages of this economic boom. The U.S. is where all of the action is going to be for a while.
Danny, things have been moving very fast. New developments, rumors, and deals are being announced around the clock. Why don't you quickly take our viewers through the current state of the cannabis industry in America?
Sure thing. Let's put up the map. You'll see here we have 33 states where medical cannabis is legal. You can also add Guam and Puerto Rico. Okay, can we change the map? Now, we have only 10 states highlighted, including some big ones like California and Colorado. This is where both medical and recreational cannabis is legal. You can put up Washington, D.C. up on the board too. So we've got a long way to go to reach full legalization. That hasn't stopped this industry from experiencing explosive growth though. Revenue has quadrupled between 2014 and today, hitting $10.8 billion. Let's talk about jobs. Right now, cannabis businesses employ 200,000 Americans. That trend is not going to slow down either. Forbes is reporting that by 2020, we could have more cannabis jobs in the U.S. than manufacturing jobs.
Danny, you hit the nail on the head. When I'm talking to politicians, cannabis jobs are a major selling point. but so is the tax revenue. Colorado, perfect example. Since 2014, they've collected in the neighborhood of $815 million in tax revenue from cannabis. That's not $815 million in sales. They're ringing up billions there. That's $815 million in just tax revenue. Colorado poured that money into infrastructure projects, plugging holes in budgets, healthcare. Heck, $21 million was handed to law enforcement. The police are using cannabis tax dollars to keep the streets safe. And the biggest chunk of this cash, $200 million, has gone toward building new schools. Out in Deer Trail, Colorado, there was an elementary school that was falling apart. Sewage leak in the locker room, swimming pool wasn't safe, school doors wouldn't lock, no wheelchair ramps. Disabled kids had to be carried up the stairs. Thanks to all of those cannabis tax dollars, Deer Trail got a new elementary school.
If cannabis is already a $10 billion industry in America, it's creating all of these jobs and tax revenue, yet we're still at the very beginning of this boom. How big could it get?
Look, this rapid growth is happening while cannabis is still quasi-legal. The federal government is holding the industry back in a serious way. But even if nothing changes, our guys are projecting it will reach a $50 billion mark within 5 years.
What if something big does change? What if the federal government legalizes cannabis? The prohibition is done.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's inevitable. Voters want it. Economic benefits are too big to ignore. Now, I got to choose my words carefully. What I'm hearing behind closed doors is pretty sensitive. Let me just say this. I have a strong suspicion we won't be waiting 5 years to see the federal government legalize cannabis. When that happens, whenever that happens, our guys are saying the industry will double practically overnight.
$100 billion just in the United States.
$100 billion. Like I said, practically overnight. Long term, the numbers are off the charts. Those 200,000 jobs that Danny just mentioned, with full legalization, that number could hit 1.1 million jobs. And $100 billion in revenue, we might just blow past that.
Globally, this could become a $1 trillion industry, simply because it affects so many others. The pharmaceutical industry is good for another $1.1 trillion. Alcohol, $1.3 trillion. Food and agribusiness is already a $5 trillion industry. When we get full legalization, you are going to see the floodgates open in these industries and so many more.
You both believe the federal government is going to end this prohibition and legalize cannabis. That hasn't happened yet. Talk about the ongoing challenges this presents to the industry.
Well, there are three big ones, starting with cannabis being classified as a Schedule I drug. But let me push back on calling these challenges. I think these are enormous opportunities. You have the ability to get on the ground floor of the biggest economic phenomenon of our lifetime before it really takes off.
For folks who aren't familiar with the term, when you say cannabis is a Schedule I drug, what exactly does that mean?
The FDA slaps a label on every drug from a bottle of aspirin to the illegal stuff. They're each classified somewhere between a Schedule I and Schedule V. Schedule I is for the most dangerous and addictive drugs. 5, the safest. And look at this. They have cannabis as a Schedule I drug right next to heroin and LSD. Jump down to Schedule II and you'll find cocaine and meth, along with prescription drugs like Adderall and Vicodin.
I don't care how you feel about cannabis, nobody in their right mind thinks it's more dangerous than cocaine or meth. I mean, anabolic steroids are a Schedule III drug, yet somehow cannabis is grouped with heroin and ecstasy?
There's no rational explanation for this. According to the DEA, Schedule I drugs are highly addictive and have no medical benefits. Cannabis is not highly addictive. And there have been more than 23,000 scientific papers released on the potential medical applications. Alzheimer's, cancer, epilepsy, post-traumatic stress disorder, autoimmune diseases, and the list goes on and on. Our guys estimate that about 80% of all cannabis use is medical. Every single day since I've become involved in this industry, I've had people tell me it's helping them. I was just in the Fort Myers airport, and this older gentleman stops me and says, "John, I want to thank you for your position on this issue. I'm 85 years old. I've got really bad arthritis. And if it weren't for cannabis, I couldn't function."
People spend a lot of money treating their arthritis. Now, chronic pain is a $77 billion industry. Cannabis only needs to capture a tiny fraction of that market to have an enormous impact. Same goes for sleep-related issues like insomnia. We've got somewhere between 50 and 70 million Americans dealing with this.
If you walk into your doctor's office and say, "Hey, doc, I can't sleep," what will your doctor prescribe for you?
I don't know, Ambien, maybe Lunesta?
Exactly. Those drugs, Ambien especially, can have some pretty nasty side effects. Some folks will take them, go on a joyride, Wake up in a cornfield in the middle of nowhere, and they can't remember a damn thing.
Pharmaceutical companies are on track to make about $102 billion a year selling dangerous sleep drugs. That presents a massive opportunity. A $102 billion opportunity for cannabis. Treating Crohn's disease is also worth paying attention to. There was a study in Israel where 90% of patients saw significant improvement after using cannabis. Nearly half went into complete remission. We can add another $7.6 billion opportunity for cannabis therapies right there.
Another place cannabis can make a difference is with epilepsy, childhood epilepsy in particular. Now go on YouTube and you'll see parents posting before and after videos of their kids. Kids who used to be struck by 50 seizures a day, now they're experiencing 0, all because of special cannabis therapies. Check this out. Here's a brain scan of a little girl who was forced to live with nonstop epileptic seizures. This is before she underwent cannabis therapy. Here's what it looked like after. It's amazing.
Scientists have engineered these treatments so they don't contain THC. Now, THC is what makes someone feel high from cannabis, and the FDA has already approved one cannabis treatment for epilepsy. In fact, they even made a special exception and dropped the specific drug down to a Schedule 5, so it's right next to Robitussin. The firm behind this drug, GW Pharmaceuticals, they've shot up over 1,800%. Now, they're worth about $4 billion.
You know, epilepsy is very expensive to treat. People were spending about $10.4 billion a year. But there's some good news. Recent studies suggest costs are going to be cut in half, down to about $5 billion, due in large part to the potential of cannabis treatments. This could lessen the financial burden for those with epilepsy, while still creating a $5 billion revenue stream. That's a win-win in my book. And there are many pharmaceutical companies working on even more promising treatments for countless conditions, all using cannabis.
So how is cannabis being a Schedule I drug holding back this process?
Bureaucratic red tape. Here's how screwed up this is. A doctor in California wanted to study cannabis as a treatment for veterans with PTSD. It took her 7 years to navigate through this regulatory mess to receive approval. Next, she had to purchase cannabis from what was, until recently, the only place the federal government allowed, a lab at the University of Mississippi. 20 months later, they sent it to her and it was full of mold.
Almost 9 years to get a study off the ground? This is not a system that is conducive to getting results.
Fortunately, there's mounting pressure to fix this issue, obviously from the American people. But many in the government are doing their part as well. The head of the FDA believes scientific research into cannabis could lead to discovery of important medical therapies. He gave his team the green light to continue exploring these breakthroughs. But the big move needs to come from the DEA. They drop cannabis to a Schedule II or Schedule III drug, you will quickly see a boatload of money flood into research projects. From there, new treatments and therapies will follow. And that's when the stocks of a bunch of small pharmaceutical companies could go on a run. They won't be the household names either. If you move now, you're going to be really happy a little bit down the road. So I look at this as an opportunity, not a challenge. The same goes for extreme banking restrictions that have been placed on the industry. It's the second major roadblock. Right now, cannabis companies are cut off from using regular banks and securing traditional financing through those banks. For the most part, they're forced to rely on local credit unions. There are over $1 billion in cannabis cash sitting in those vaults. Something has to be done, and something will get done soon.
You sound pretty confident about that.
Well, I used to count votes. I know where the votes are, and the votes will be there when the time is right.
Now, you're friends with President Trump. How does he really feel about legalizing cannabis?
If I tell you about our private conversations, I won't have any more of them with the president. What I'm willing to say is, after I came out in favor of cannabis, President Trump said, I agree with Boehner. I think he's right.
Trump's Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, seems to be voicing support for legalization. He's quoted as saying the cannabis industry's banking problem is on the top of his list and his team is working on it now.
While Secretary Mnuchin is working on this, the average investor has an opportunity to strike, and they should. With traditional investments, only 17.5% of the money comes from little fish like you and me, Mike. The other 82.5% is from the big players, the major investment firms, the hedge funds, pension funds, established corporations. Banking restrictions are preventing almost all of those investment firms and funds from diving headfirst into cannabis.
Well, they're dying to get in. I'm helping some of these bigger fish get ready to invest. There's hundreds of billions of dollars sitting on the sidelines.
That's exactly what happened in Canada. They had been talking about full legalization for years. It was as close to a surefire thing as it gets. So the heavy hitters, the Vanguards, the Morgan Stanleys, the BlackRocks, they started making the trip up to Canada with their big bag of cash in hand. They knocked on the doors of these tiny cannabis firms, and suddenly they weren't so tiny anymore. Take Aphria. By the fourth quarter of 2016, it was clear they had a bright future. Aphria had a market cap of 313 million Canadian dollars. Then the major institutional firms came knocking. Vanguard, Credit Suisse, RBC, BlackRock all locked up their stakes. Aphria's stock took off like a rocket. About a year later, it had shot up as much as 659%. Their market cap has now reached $4.3 billion. You'll find a similar trajectory with Aurora Cannabis. During the third quarter of 2017, they had a market cap of about $760 million. Then, they caught the attention of the major institutional firms. Horizon Investment Management struck first. After that, we had Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and UBS, among others, joining them. Aurora's stock went on a tear, rising as high as 641%. Today, you're looking at a company with a market cap of $11.7 billion. One more, Canopy Growth. Right now, they're one of the largest cannabis firms on the planet. They do business in, I believe, 11 countries across 5 continents. They grow cannabis and process it into oils, soft gel capsules, just about anything you can imagine. Now, back in 2015, they were barely a blip on the radar. Their market cap was around $90 million Canadian, what we'd call a microcap stock, really tiny, really volatile. Microcaps have more risk, but if you find the right one, it can take off. This time, it was BlackRock who got things moving. Not long after, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, State Street, and others jumped in on the bandwagon. Since they made their moves, Canopy Growth has hit peak gains of 3,813%, and they are now worth $14.4 billion.
Okay, you talked about cannabis being a Schedule I drug and the banking restrictions on the industry. Let's examine that third challenge that we can flip into an opportunity.
This comes down to yet another boondoggle at the IRS. There's a specific code that needs to be reformed, IRS Code 280E. In a nutshell, if you have a business that directly touches cannabis, like dispensaries, you can't deduct normal expenses. Employee salaries, rent, utilities, advertising, that kind of stuff. I'm telling you, some of the most brilliant minds in accounting are now focused on the cannabis industry. They're creating these complex strategies for working around IRS Code 280E. In reality, they won't need to do that much longer. This is the low-hanging fruit, the easiest challenge to solve. My former House colleagues were already working on this. And once we get that changed, every company in the cannabis industry instantly gets a massive tax cut. This could single-handedly double or triple their profits.
Naturally, that would lead to rapid growth in the industry. I can easily see that adding tens of billions of dollars by itself. How long until you think that law will be changed?
Not long. I believe the timeline will be measured in months more than years. There's a group in Congress working to fix it right now. It'll get fixed because everybody wants it.
Gentlemen, we've got a big announcement to make. Everybody is going to want to hear this. And in a few moments, we're also going to examine the 3 cannabis investment opportunities our viewers should consider immediately. But first, let's discuss what's next for this industry. It's growing faster than any other in America. What we know about all industries, Harvard did a great study about this, is that they all go through 4 major stages. It happened with railroads, energy, telecom, automotive, internet, you name it. The first phase is a free-for-all. There are tons of startups and small firms. New players are constantly entering the market. Nobody has giant market share, no clear winners yet. Phase 2, that's where we see massive consolidation. Smaller companies start merging. Bigger companies acquire smaller ones. Phase 3, that's where the mega deals happen. The big guys start merging with each other. We've seen plenty of these deals eclipse $100 billion. Then phase 4 is where the action slows down. You have just a handful of big players in an industry. This is the blue chip stock phase. John, where do you think cannabis falls on this timeline?
We're in a sweet spot right now. Cannabis is nearing the end of phase 1, and here's where it gets me really excited. We're starting to see those red blinking lights, signaling this industry is about to jump into phase 2 with a bang. Rapid consolidation could lead to rapid profits for those who strike now. The writing's on the wall. Scott's Miracle-Gro, the boring fertilizer company, they were one of the first movers. Their CEO declared that cannabis was the biggest thing he's ever seen. Initially, he committed to investing $500 million in the sector. But then he starts buying cannabis companies, and he can't stop. Hydroponics and lighting companies, companies that sell soil to cannabis farmers. He's already cut checks totaling $705 million. Scott's Miracle-Gro isn't the only household name eyeing the cannabis market. Johnson & Johnson is linked up with two small firms. Coca-Cola is talking about making cannabis-infused beverages. I was on the board of a major tobacco company, Reynolds. You think big tobacco is staying on the sidelines? I've talked to these guys. They're going to sit this one out, and they have the dollars to acquire whoever they want. We're just beginning to see some action in this space. Imperial Brands, makers of Kool and Winston cigarettes, they invested in a medical marijuana research firm in the UK.
We can't forget the alcohol companies. On August 1st, Molson Coors announced they were partnering with Hexo Corp to create cannabis-infused beverages. Almost immediately, Hexo's stock jumped as much as 124%. About 2 weeks after the ink dried on that deal, Constellation Brands pulled off one of their own. Constellation owns Corona. They invested $5 billion into Canopy Growth. Canopy stock jumped as much as 133% after that deal. Not bad at all. But remember, if you were one of their early investors, you'd be looking at peak gains of 3,813%. With Hexo, their early investors could have been up over 670%.
It's been the worst kept secret that some of these household names were chomping at the bit to get into cannabis. Now, what's intriguing, though, is watching the larger cannabis firms begin to push their weight around to scoop up smaller competitors.
Afria, case in point. I told you how their stock went up 659% after they began cashing checks from institutional firms. But go back even further to earlier in their phase 1 days, shares have risen as much as 4,720%. All of this growth and investment capital left them flush with cash. So they spent $425 million to acquire Nuvera. Nuvera's appeal was pretty obvious. They were a Canadian firm that received approval to export cannabis to countries where it was legal. Now, if you were an early investor in Nuvera and were holding those shares when Afria purchased them, you could have made 976%.
Mike, the moral of the story is cannabis is about to enter its second phase. But it's not there yet. We're still in phase 1, but barely. That means you can still stake your claim in some of the firms for a fraction of what they could be worth weeks or months from now. The next generation of billion-dollar cannabis companies are ripe for the picking. You just have to make smart moves. Don't go blindly investing in this sector because it's exciting and you don't want to miss the boat. The boat hasn't left the dock yet.
That's exactly what our big announcement is about. John, like you, my own views on cannabis have evolved. You know this already, but I'll explain it for the folks at home. Now, as a publisher of Money Morning, I'm responsible for making sure we provide safe and profitable financial advice for our 3.6 million daily readers. Our analysts and researchers have been closely tracking the cannabis sector for years. Now, initially, we decided that pot stocks were just too dangerous to recommend. It was the Wild West, a bunch of fly-by-night companies with suspect financials. Some of these stocks would just explode and then come crashing down. No rhyme or reason to it. I remember looking at a tiny company called Praetorian Property. Their business model consisted of buying rundown real estate in bad neighborhoods and then leasing it out to cannabis firms. Praetorian goes public in 2011. 2012, the stock starts moving a little bit. Then in 2014, it mysteriously just shoots up. The stock jumped 135,000%. Almost right after, it collapses. We went digging and digging, couldn't find any real legitimate reason for the rise or fall. We chalked it up to someone outside the group pumping and dumping the stock. And there were a lot of suspicious moves like that. By 2016, though, we noticed the industry was getting its act together. My team came to me and said, look, we have the November elections coming up. We've noticed that certain cannabis stocks are susceptible to big jumps whenever states pass new laws. They had already examined 64 companies that had shot up over 1,000%. 11 surged past 10,000%. 5 of them over 25,000%. And 3 stocks had jumped at least 50,000%. Now, we determined that this fast movement was due almost entirely to new cannabis laws being passed. So in November of 2016, we had Massachusetts, Maine, Nevada, and California voting to legalize recreational cannabis. We had Arkansas, North Dakota, Montana, and Florida looking to pass new medical marijuana laws. I knew this had the potential to be an incredible opportunity, so I instructed my team to release all of our research on our top 30 cannabis stocks. When the dust had settled from the 2016 election, those states approved their new laws. And in the months that followed, all 30 stocks we recommended were up. In fact, 17 of them have reached triple digits. Canagro, 456% in a month and a half. InMed Pharmaceuticals, 617% in about 4 months. General Cannabis Corp, 642% around a month and a half. Mentor Capital shot up as much as 1,828% in less than 6 months. Canopy Growth, 1,869%. Almost immediately after we released those recommendations, I started getting flooded with letters thanking me. I remember reading one from a Korean War vet. He was 83 years old and called this opportunity a gold mine. He said he made $5,000 during his first month. Then the money seemed to come in daily. $1,200 one day, another $1,300 the next, $1,700 a day after that. But he wasn't alone. We had other folks who were up $15,000 or more in a matter of days, tens of thousands of dollars in a few weeks. Besides being new to investing in cannabis stocks, some of these folks had barely invested in anything at all, ever. Yet they still saw the potential of this industry. Another reader perfectly summed up this opportunity. He thought it was going to transform him into a marijuana millionaire. John, Danny, seeing the response from these people, how successful they were from cannabis investing, it changed my mind.
You saw the light?
Yes, but we also saw what happened after. The charlatans started coming out of the woodwork. We started seeing sketchy companies promising magical pot stock blueprints. They were telling folks they could turn $50 into $1 million.
I've seen ads just like that. Guys that are probably working out of their mom's basements, peddling bad information to make a quick buck, preying on people's excitement.
That's why I approached both of you. There are millions of Americans hungry for credible information on cannabis investing, straight talk on the risks and the opportunities. So we laid out a pretty bold plan. Let's get all the experts in the cannabis industry on the same team. We'll create a united front. We'll use our combined expertise to bring our members the absolute best research and the most lucrative investment opportunities in the cannabis industry. Today, we are officially launching the National Institute of Cannabis Investors. John, there's no one in the cannabis industry who's more connected inside Washington. People would pay millions of dollars to be a fly on the wall at some of the meetings you're involved with now. So having you as part of the Institute is priceless.
Well, I'm happy to be working with you. And as I said, I'm all in on cannabis.
Danny, having taken 2 cannabis firms public, including the largest cannabis IPO in history, your insights on private deals and IPOs is unmatched.
Glad I can contribute. We're going to be doing some incredible things together.
Now with you guys on board, we invested millions of dollars into expanding our team of analysts and researchers. Then we went out and established our founding board. John Vardaman is on it. John was a senior lawyer in the Department of Justice for Presidents Bush and Obama. In 2014, he drafted the Cole Memo that said the federal government would not go after states that legalize cannabis. Michael Robinson's specialty is venture capital and cannabis technology investing. We have Avtar Dillon. Avtar is the first chairman of the Cannabis Canada Association. He was also the former CEO of Inovio Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Michael Dorr has signed on as well. Now, Dr. Dorr graduated from both Tel Aviv University and Harvard, and today he's the senior advisor on cannabis research for the Israeli Ministry of Health.
That's a big deal. We didn't touch on Israel, but they're an important part of the cannabis industry. With all the restrictions on research over here, some of the best work is being done in Israel.
Exactly, and these are just a few of the many people we've added to join the board. Now, we're inviting the folks watching this at home to join our team as founding members. Nobody has ever done anything like this before. We are going to be the source for cannabis investing. I'm sure our viewers have a lot of questions, so let's answer them. Danny, let's say I'm someone who's interested in joining this venture. What can I expect?
We're going to be primarily targeting 4 main areas of the cannabis industry. Breakthrough treatments, the companies developing pharmaceutical grade and natural health therapies and drugs. Billion-dollar brands. These are the tiny firms that have the potential to become brands that are worth billions of dollars. I've helped launch them myself. A lot of folks on the board have too. We're also going to focus on cannabis tech and finally, angel investing.
We know members are going to want to get started right away, so we've prepared 4 special reports. one for each of these areas. We'll be sending them out in just a few minutes when this broadcast ends. Let's talk about the firm we have lined up for our breakthrough treatment play.
We believe we've got somebody who's ready to capture a big piece of the $1.1 trillion pharmaceutical industry. Cannabis is just starting to break into this market. The FDA approving GW Pharmaceuticals' epilepsy treatment was only a sign of things to come. Cannabis drugs for epilepsy could be a $5 billion opportunity. And that's why GW Pharmaceutical stock is up as much as 1,830%. And we believe the company we're recommending has an even better treatment. And it's not just for epilepsy. I'll explain, but pardon me if I don't get too technical. Basically, a cannabis plant has two active parts. There's the THC, then there's the CBD. And that's the part showing the most medical promise right now. And the guys we're looking at were one of the first to prove CBD could be used to stop epileptic seizures. Now, if you're taking cannabis purely for medical reasons, you're going to want something with as little THC as possible, but the purest dose of CBD you can get. GW's pharmaceutical drug is called Epidiolex. It has a fair amount of THC in it, 1,500 parts per million. Now, if I'm the parent of a child with epilepsy, and I'm giving it a lot of thought before I let my son or daughter take a drug with that much THC in it. The firm we've vetted has a therapy with only 13 parts of THC per million. That means their CBD is pure. It's also much cheaper. GW Pharmaceuticals' drug costs $2,708 a month. Our firm, only $99 a month.
Another problem with GW's drug is that FDA approval itself. It's only approved for epilepsy. A $5 billion market is not bad, but if you have the ability to treat a lot of conditions, you're going to be in the driver's seat. The firm we're targeting has created 12 liquid versions of their CBD treatment at different strengths. 4 pill-based products, 4 topical creams and lotions. They even have 2 different CBD treatments for dogs. And here's an enormous competitive advantage. You need a prescription for GW's drug. All of our firm's products are available over the counter. No prescription necessary. And they have the potential to treat many conditions. The biggest opportunity being chronic pain.
That's what stood out to me, Danny. If you can safely treat pain, you can also fight the opioid epidemic. We lose far too many people to opioid overdoses, much more than any other drug. Nobody has ever overdosed on cannabis. That's probably a reason Dr. Sanjay Gupta went out and talked to the founders of the company we're recommending. He said if he had to design a drug from scratch to fight the opioid epidemic, it would look a lot like cannabis.
Well, we know from a list of studies that opioid overdoses have fallen in the states where cannabis has been legalized. Politicians are quickly opening their eyes about this. The governor of Illinois made it legal for doctors to prescribe cannabis to patients instead of prescription painkillers. This will put the $77.1 billion chronic pain market up for grabs over the next few years.
Add sleep problems to the list too. That's another $10 billion market by 2020. You start thinking about all of the possible medical applications and your head will spin. Big picture. Cannabis, more specifically CBD-based treatments, are one of the biggest opportunities in the industry. The market is set to grow 3,667% over the next 5 years.
And the firm we've identified is set to capture the lion's share of this market. I think we should stress again that they can sell their products over the counter without a prescription. They're already on the shelves at 2,700 retail stores across the country, and year over year, their revenue has jumped 172%. But there is a great deal of room for growth still. We've learned they've been talking to Target.
Yes, we have. If they work out a distribution deal, that could put them in 1,839 more stores. Think about Whole Foods. They have 490 stores, or Kroger's. There's another 2,780. Safeway, Publix, all these other grocery stores could stock these products on their shelves in all 50 states. The upside here is really big. They just had their IPO a couple months ago. We've already seen a handful of unusual, really exceptional returns from cannabis firms working on medical therapies. 22nd Century Group has risen as much as 2,455%. Supreme Cannabis Company hit peak gains of over 4,800%. And Medical Cannabis Innovations was up over 14,000% at one point. We've got the best medical CBD play out there today.
Everything is in this special report. We're calling it Prescription-Free CBD. We've also identified our top cannabis tech opportunity. It's in our second special report, The Innovator. What should our viewers know about this company?
I know I speak for a lot of folks when I say I like investing in things I understand. In the tech sector, we're bombarded with companies building robots with artificial intelligence, or rocket ships to Mars, or chips that will supposedly be implanted in our bodies. Things that sound like they're from some sci-fi movie. But time and again, what makes money in tech is a basic proposition. You got a big problem? I've got a simple solution for it. We're all familiar with this. Just a regular old prescription pill bottle. Some folks making these bottles refuse to work with cannabis companies. But you walk into a dispensary and every product you buy is required to come in a child-resistant packaging. And so this young man just out of college says, I can do that. So some years back, he invents a child-resistant top for a bottle. And he goes around to all the companies in California and Colorado that are selling cannabis and tells them, hey, I hear you need this. And he can't make these bottles fast enough. Everybody's buying them. We have some here. This is a child-proof pop-top bottle. This is what's called a pre-roll container. And they have a wide assortment of products.
This company is taking off. They have sold over 1 billion units. And to your point, the cannabis industry had a big problem. They needed safe containers for their products. This company had a simple solution, and they invented those containers. You can make your shareholders very happy if you deliver on that very basic proposition. Big problem, simple solution. A ways back, we saw this with a company called Grow Generation. They solved a simple problem. You see, in most places, growing season for cannabis isn't year-round, but the demand for cannabis is year-round. That's why farmers set up indoor operations in greenhouses. Now, that requires a lot of space if you want to grow a serious amount of cannabis the traditional way. Instead, farmers turn to a method called hydroponics. It allows you to grow cannabis without soil. It requires significantly less space. Grow Generation sells hydroponics technology. With soaring demand in the industry, their stock has jumped as much as 563%.
Cannabis Technologies also invented a simple solution for a big problem. If someone is driving under the influence of alcohol and a cop pulls them over, they're going to have to get a breathalyzer test. Well, what happens if the cop suspects they're driving under the influence of cannabis? Well, Cannabis Technologies developed a breathalyzer that can detect THC on your breath. Their stock has gone up as much as 5,826%.
So what's the potential upside for our target?
It's bigger than the companies I just mentioned, that's for sure. Cannabis is about to enter into a phase of massive consolidation. This is imminent. During this consolidation, we expect this firm to be the one acquiring companies, not the one being acquired. Considering this will be a multi-billion-dollar market, they're still tiny. Nonetheless, they've been strategically buying up their smaller competitors, and they've now moved beyond offering just child-proof bottles. They have all kinds of packaging and solvents for processing cannabis, and they've got a lot of clients. They count 5,000 cannabis companies as customers, and seizing on that opportunity, they bought a digital creative agency that helps their clients with branding. That's another growing revenue stream for them. They check off a lot of the boxes for me.
We've got the full story on this company in our second special report. Now let's talk about our third. It reveals our top billion-dollar brand play. We're calling this report Cannabis's first household name. John, what's your take on it?
At Acreage, we're betting brands are the future of cannabis. So it makes a great brand. Molson Coors Brewing is a $14 billion company. Not because they just sell beer. No, they sell brands of beer. Brands people like. Miller, Coors, Molson. Diageo is the world's biggest liquor company. They're worth $84 billion. You go out on the street and ask 10 people if they've ever heard of them. I'll guess maybe one or two have. Ask them if they've ever heard of Johnny Walker, Smirnoff, Captain Morgan. You'll go 10 for 10. Everybody knows these brands. Anheuser-Busch InBev is worth $178 billion. They've got Budweiser and Modelo.
What is it that leads you to believe the company in this special report will become a billion-dollar brand?
They have a lot going for them. First, obviously, you need a good product. They have developed a line of high-quality cannabis oils. This stuff is very potent too. It's 6 times stronger than smoking the plant. A couple of drops and you're good. But just having a good product won't cut it in this industry. With cannabis, traditional advertising isn't an option. You can't be running ads during the Super Bowl or your favorite primetime sitcom, so you have to be pretty smart marketers to build your brand. To me, this company's secret weapon is their team. They've recruited top executives from Philip Morris, Coca-Cola, Kraft Foods, Eli Lilly, all major brand builders from the tobacco, beverage, packaged goods, and pharmaceutical industries, and these guys have developed a workaround to the advertising problem. They launched a separate line of nutritional supplements, no cannabis in them whatsoever. They can advertise and sell them anywhere. This is a really unique idea. It's estimated that 60% of cannabis users also take natural health supplements. So their plan is to build name recognition in that industry, and that will carry over to their cannabis business. I think their plan is working out really well for them so far. Over the last 2 years, their sales have multiplied 19 times. To this point, only a couple of cannabis companies have established any brand traction. Take Cannabis Sativa. You could have argued that they made progress creating brand recognition for their line of beauty products. Shareholders have seen their holdings rise as much as 3,165% over the last 2 years from that.
Canopy Growth has some promising brands under their control. They use their financial muscle to buy them versus build them. For instance, they just paid $350 million to lock up one of the fastest growing brands, Tokyo Smoke.
Canopy's brand strategy played a huge part in their stock rising 3,813%. We believe we've identified the next big brand in cannabis.
I'm glad you mentioned Tokyo Smoke. In 2016, they were a startup that was valued at barely $3 million. But in 2018, they were part of a $350 million acquisition. If you were an angel investor in Tokyo Smoke in 2016, you were very happy when Canopy bought them 2 years later. One of the most exciting aspects of the National Institute of Cannabis Investors is that we're going to show people how they can become angel investors in this industry. That's what our fourth report is about. We're calling it, simply enough, the #1 cannabis startup to target today.
In America, angel investing used to be something that only the wealthiest 2% could take part in. But this has been gradually changing over the years. Back in 2012, there was a provision in the Jobs Act that opened this world up to everyday investors. Angel investing is highly speculative, but if you can dedicate a small slice of your portfolio to it, you could earn oversized returns. You want a legendary example? Consider Airbnb. In 2008, they were a small startup that was renting out air mattresses. Like most in Silicon Valley, they needed to raise money from angel investors to grow. They found some that were willing to back them. Airbnb was worth $1.5 million then. Today, they're worth $31 billion. Airbnb's valuation has grown literally more than 2 million % since those lucky angel investors got in. I've got a buddy who is an angel investor and also produces movies. He was on set in Philadelphia for one of his sports films. He's talking to another producer, former exec for a major online travel company. The guy tells him he passed up the chance to invest in Airbnb's seed round, and it haunts him every single day. Airbnb's story is more the exception than the rule. The company raising 2 million % is quite rare, but let me give you a more realistic scenario. I've helped take 2 companies public, the most recent being TGOD, or the Green Organic Dutchman. If you were an investor when we IPO'd, you could have made 231% in a little more than a month. Now, rewind back about a year and a half when we were still privately held. We sold shares to angel investors for 50 cents a piece. If you had gotten in then, you would have seen a gain of 1,556%. Since IPOing, shares of Aurora Cannabis have risen as high as 1,947%. That's a big profit, about 20 times your money. The bigger profit was reserved for their angel investors. One of their earliest angels was an electrician who had been talked into backing this little-known privately held cannabis startup. His original investment is now worth tens of millions of dollars.
In this special report, we're going to show members all of the ins and outs on how to become a successful angel investor in cannabis startups. We even have the details on a unique opportunity already locked and loaded for them. These 4 special reports are just the beginning of what you can expect as a founding member of the National Institute of Cannabis Investors. Every month, we're also going to send you a new cannabis investment package. It gives you all the research and details on another cannabis opportunity that's just as big. To get it in your hands as fast as possible, we'll email you a copy as soon as it's available. And for your records, every month we'll mail you a physical copy of the research we published. Our team has built the most comprehensive database of cannabis companies on the planet. Every publicly traded cannabis company, and the most promising privately held startups too. They have all been carefully analyzed. We've looked at their financials, their business plan. We've put their executives through a comprehensive vetting process. We assign each company a rating. It's a 1 to 5 scale, so it's simple to understand. If we've rated a company 5, we're saying we think their stock is headed straight up. If it's a 1, we see it as a dud, and you don't want your money anywhere near it. Then every month, our founding board will take all of the top-rated companies and identify the best of the best. It could be a firm with a new breakthrough treatment, a new cannabis tech play, an emerging billion-dollar brand, maybe a new opportunity related to angel investing. We'll lay out all of the details and send you everything you need to know in this investment package. This monthly package will be very thorough. It contains all of our research and analysis so you can make a wise decision about whether or not you want to invest. And we'll give you a streamlined set of instructions for making the investment. Just follow along step by step.
Mike, we didn't talk about the presentations. Every investment package we send you comes with an interactive video presentation. The Institute's head analyst personally walks you step by step through every chart, all the financials, and our projections for future returns. We want you to see the opportunities through our eyes, so we're going to show you exactly how we are assessing them.
That's right, and we're going to be by your side the whole time as these investments develop. The purpose of this institute is to build a network of like-minded people like John, Danny, and other board members, and also you. You're going to be a part of this network. We're going to conquer this $100 billion, maybe $1 trillion industry together. That's why we created the Cannabis Investors Network. We're leveraging our board members' intelligence gathering, their business connections, and their political connections. Every time there's an opportunity to make big money in this industry, you'll hear about it first before the rest of the world gets clued in.
That's why, in addition to the monthly recommendations from the folks at the Institute, you'll hear from the brightest CEOs and experts from around the industry. They'll conduct business pitches just for our members. They'll explain why you should consider investing in their companies.
Well, we've lined up 11 of these business pitches for you on day one. We're putting Bruce Linton, the CEO of Canopy Growth, the $14 billion company, on the hot seat, and Lauren Paddleford, too. He's the vice president of retail giant Shopify.
Shopify is one of those companies that nobody thinks of as being associated with the cannabis industry, but they are. We use them in Jamaica for the Green Organic Dutchman. They're helping cannabis companies like ours build payment solutions that stay compliant with local and national regulations. It's one of the reasons their stock has delivered peak gains of 938%. I love finding behind-the-scenes plays like this.
There are a lot more coming. Again, we have 11 business pitches waiting for you on day one, and we have even more top CEOs in the cannabis industry ready for the hot seat. I'm not allowed to mention names yet, but we're going to start announcing them soon in the Cannabis Investment Network. Now, when you see the opportunities coming your way, you'll want to discuss them with other members, and you can. The Cannabis Investors Network lets you create your own forums. You can talk about the pitches or the deals outlined in the investment packages. You can share your biggest wins and discuss other exciting new ways to make money from cannabis.
Board members are going to be very active in this network. Every month, the Institute hosts a live online boardroom meeting. You can listen in as leaders in this industry, exchange business ideas, and present new opportunities. The board will talk about deals being worked on, political changes taking place, new players entering the market, and big mergers and acquisitions. And if you have questions, you can submit them live. The board members will cover as many as they can.
We want you to take advantage of this ability to collaborate. There's even a way for you to take it a step further. With the click of a few buttons, you can start your own local chapter of the Cannabis Investors Network. So if you live here in the DC area, or Dallas, or Memphis, or anywhere in the US, you can schedule meetups at a nearby restaurant or pub. The website makes arranging these simple. All it takes is a couple clicks.
You're going to be hearing about a lot of different opportunities, a lot of big opportunities. So we're making it simple for you to keep on top of everything happening. We created an easy-to-use portfolio tracker. It lets you see every position we've recommended so far, their current rating, and how well they're all performing. You can also import all of your traditional investments if you'd like. That way, you can see your entire portfolio in one place. Plus, every week, we're going to send you a progress report. If there's any new developments, mergers, or acquisitions, anything you need to know, you'll be kept in the loop.
And every quarter, we will mail you a comprehensive State of the Cannabis Industry dossier. It will have a complete forecast and projections for each segment of the industry. Now, we could be in some of these investments for weeks, months, even a year or longer, but eventually, there will come a time to cash out. When that happens, we'll email you a real-time profit alert. It's a set of simple, step-by-step instructions. Just follow along and collect any profits you've earned. If you want, we'll even send you a text message when these emails are released. Now, considering how fast some of these plays move, that can be critical to your success. Look at Tilray. Just 2 months after their IPO in July of 2018, their stock jumped to peak gains of 1,392%. And there were clear signs that this was the exit point. If you'd waited until the next day to sell, you would have missed out on potentially thousands of dollars in profits. So these text message alerts can be extremely profitable for you.
You know, it can be intimidating to try new things, like investing in the cannabis industry. When you're first coming on board, you'll probably want to get to know the industry. So I think a really useful part of the website is the training series.
That's a great point, John. We wanted to make this accessible to everyone. So our team created a 5-part video training series. We go in depth on each different segment of the industry. We'll show you how to break down the market state by state and country by country. We have videos covering all types of cannabis products. You want to know the difference between flower and hash, concentrates and edibles? These videos will fill you in. We have videos showing you how to analyze a cannabis business plan and what to look for. We even have a training for folks who have never bought a stock in their entire life. We'll talk about selecting a brokerage account, depositing and withdrawing funds, placing trades, all the basics. John and Danny, we're about out of time. There's just one more thing I want to talk about before we go. Every year, we're going to host the National Institute of Cannabis Investors Retreat. You and a guest will be able to attend. You'll get to meet face-to-face with some of the biggest names in the industry. This is very important. You'll shake hands with the CEOs of the biggest firms. You'll get to meet executives at the most promising startups. You'll have a front row seat as key players present their latest developments. This is also a perfect opportunity to network with your fellow members.
Having spent 30 years in DC, I can tell you that face-to-face networking like that is a critical part of success. Deals get done behind closed doors. So being in that room could be a real game changer.
This isn't going to be all work, John. We're going to have some fun too. We're hosting a cocktail party. We'll have a champagne toast prepared. Maybe we'll even get in a round of golf. John, how many presidents have you golfed with?
Well, the last 3, and no, I'm not going to say which one had the lower handicap.
And you're going to squeeze around in a 3-treat.
Of course.
Gentlemen, we're about to open the doors to new members. Before we do, I have a gift for each of you. Founders membership cards to the National Institute of Cannabis Investors, the first 3. Danny, this one's for you.
I'll put it to good use.
And John, here's yours.
Well, great. I'll carry it proudly.
And this one is for me. I have one waiting for you as well. You're invited to become a founding member of the National Institute of Cannabis Investors. There's a link below this video. It will take you to a short membership application form. It only takes a few moments to fill it out, and then we'll rush you your new member package. In addition to your founder's membership card, your package includes the 4 special reports we just talked about: prescription-free CBD, The Innovator, cannabis's first household name, and the #1 cannabis startup to target today. Then every month, you get your new cannabis investment package. Through the Cannabis Investors Network, you'll receive virtual pitches from CEOs of the most promising cannabis companies around the industry. You can submit questions in our monthly boardroom meetings, and we'll be by your side every step of the way with our weekly progress reports and real-time profit alerts. We've set this institute up to give you all the information, access, and guidance you need to help you make a fortune from cannabis. As you can see, we've pulled out all the stops. We're doing everything we can to help you create the kind of wealth that lasts for generations. We've called in every favor we could and spent millions of dollars setting up this institute, which is why it's not inexpensive to join. Down the road, we plan to offer regular memberships for $599 a year. That's a fair price for everything you're getting. However, as a founding member, you won't pay anywhere near that. Forget 50% or 60% or 70% or even 80% off today. As a founding member, you get an unbelievable discount. This is a deal too good to pass up. You have to click the button below this video to get the details. When you do, you'll also discover that your membership is protected by not 1, but 2 100% money-back guarantees. So there's no risk to you for joining. Look, we've never seen an opportunity like the one we have today with cannabis. You have the chance to get into cannabis before the federal government ends the prohibition, before big institutions pour billions of dollars into it, which can turn everyday Americans into millionaires. To be absolutely clear, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, and I do not want you to miss it. So click the button below and complete the brief membership application on the next page. Speaker John Boehner and Danny Brody, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to meet the new members that are coming on board.
Same here. This is going to be a turning point for a lot of people.
And thank you for being such an important part of today's event. We look forward to seeing you as a founding member of the National Institute of Cannabis Investors.